On May 23, 2018, Alexander Ovechkin stepped onto the ice in Tampa Bay for the biggest game of his career, Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Final. He was one win away from the first Stanley Cup final, one loss away from confirming every doubt that had shadowed him for over a decade. This wasn't just about a series, it was about everything that came before it. Alexander Ovechkin had long been the face of the Washington Capitals, a generational talent who racked up goals and assists. Yet by the spring of 2018, he still carried a painful label, the best player without a Stanley Cup. In 13 NHL seasons since his debut in 2005, Ovechkin and the Capitals had not advanced past the second round of the playoffs. Despite division titles and even back-to-back President trophies, Washington's postseason runs ended in heartbreak. Often it was the rival Pittsburgh Penguins, led by Sidney Crosby, who sent Ovechkin home empty-handed. In fact, the Penguins had won 9 of the 10 previous playoff series between the two franchises. The hockey world began to wonder if Ovechkin would join the sad fraternity of superstars who never won a cup. Critics questioned his leadership and two-way game, suggesting that Ovechkin can't push past Pittsburgh or he's not the leader he should be. The pressure mounted each spring, and with every failed run, the whispers grew louder.
The Capitals have lost to the Penguins again and have been unable to get past the second round again. I mean, what gives?
Places the blame squarely on the Capitals captain. Slava Malamud is a Russian reporter who went on an 18-tweet barrage on Wednesday night directed at Ovi.
Can it be a good thing when there's fewer outside expectations on a team?
I think we have a still good team. You know, we're not gonna be suck this year. You know.
Yet through disappointments, Ovechkin's determination never wavered. After a second-round loss to Pittsburgh in 2017, the sting was particularly sharp. The Capitals' championship window seemed to be closing, and many thought their best chances had passed. That summer, Ovechkin made a point to reset and rededicate himself. Coach Barry Trotz later revealed how personal the mission was for the captain. A lot of people were doubting if he still had what it took. He said, "I'm going to show you I'm still a great player." Ovechkin entered the 2017-2018 season on a mission, silencing any talk of decline by scoring 49 goals to capture yet another Rocket Richard trophy. Still, few could predict how dramatically the narrative was about to change. The 2018 playoffs loomed as possibly Ovechkin's last, best chance to redefine his legacy. The Capitals' 2018 playoff journey began in familiar agony. In the first round against the Columbus Blue Jackets, Washington lost the first 2 games, both in overtime, and both on home ice. It felt like a cruel case of deja vu for the Caps and their captain. After a Game 2 collapse in which Washington blew a 2-0 lead, a subdued Ovechkin faced media, struggling to explain another home playoff loss. But even as doubt crept in, Ovi's competitive fire burned. He refused to let the series slip away.
Position, but it's going to be fun when we bounce back and gonna tie the series and come back here and play Game 5.
Those words weren't empty. They were a promise from a captain who simply would not allow his team to fold. True to Ovechkin's prediction, the Capitals roared back. The series shifted to Columbus, and Washington responded. They won 2 straight games on the road to even the series, just as Ovi insisted they would. Suddenly, the demeanor in Washington's locker room changed. With momentum on their side, they closed out Columbus in 6 games. Fittingly, Ovechkin had a hand in the clincher, scoring twice in Game 6, and the team that had started the playoffs 2 games down was moving on. One hurdle was cleared, and the Capitals' confidence was growing. But the next challenge would be the one that haunted Ovechkin his entire career: the Pittsburgh Penguins. For Ovechkin and the Caps, a playoff matchup with the Pittsburgh Penguins was synonymous with heartbreak. This was the rivalry that had defined Ovechkin's career. Crosby versus Ovechkin. It was always the headline, and until 2018, Crosby's Penguins owned the story. They had met Pittsburgh in the playoffs 3 times during Ovechkin's tenure, and each time Washington was eliminated as the Penguins marched forward the Stanley Cup. Now, in the 2018 Eastern Conference semifinals, the familiar foes squared off again. Few outside of Washington expected a different script, but Ovechkin and his team sensed this year could be finally different. The series was tight and intense, as everyone anticipated. Through 5 games, the teams traded blows, and the Caps found themselves on the brink of advancing, up 3 games to 2. Ovechkin had been a force, scoring 3 times in the series and delivering bone-crunching hits each night. But Washington had been in this position before, only to have Pittsburgh snatch away the glory. Game 6 in Pittsburgh was an opportunity to finally knock out their nemesis. It was a nerve-wracking game that fittingly went to overtime, tied 1-1. In the extra period, a decade of pent-up hope and fear all boiled down to a single play. Early in OT, Ovechkin got a loose puck in the neutral zone and immediately spotted his countryman, Yevgeny Kuznetsov, streaking through a gap. In a split second, Ovi feathered a perfect pass ahead, bringing Kuznetsov on a breakaway for the season-defining moment. As Kuznetsov raced in alone, Ovechkin didn't follow the play so much as will it to end in his favor. Later he would admit that one desperate thought ran through his head in that instant: please score, just effing please score. And so he did, sliding the puck through Matt Murray's pads, and for a moment Ovechkin simply froze, then threw his arms high and looked at the rafters in disbelief and euphoria. Ovechkin had finally vanquished the Pittsburgh Penguins. However, the job was not done yet. Advancing to the Eastern Conference Final for the first time since 1998 was a landmark achievement, but Alex Ovechkin was not satisfied. "We don't have any satisfaction yet. We still don't reach our goal," he said as the Capitals prepared to face the Tampa Bay Lightning, a powerhouse that had topped the East in the regular season. Ovechkin understood that the opportunity before him was precious. As he described Game 7 of this series later, "It was probably the biggest game in my life, another do-or-die chapter in his redemption story." The matchup itself tested Washington in new ways. The Caps burst out to a 2-0 lead in the series, only to have the Lightning storm back. 3 straight wins. Suddenly, Washington was down 3-2 in the series, their season teetering on the brink. However, in those tense moments, Ovechkin's leadership shone the brightest. After a crushing 1-goal loss in Game 5, in which he scored late and played virtually the entire final minutes, Ovechkin addressed the team and the media. "Our goal is to come back here and play Game 7. It's okay, we're going to play better in Game 6, and we have to bounce back and come back and play a Game 7. And that's it. Back home for Game 6, facing elimination, Ovechkin led by example, even without scoring a goal. The Capitals played one of their best games of the year, beating the Lightning with a shutout 3-0 victory to move forward to the decisive Game 7 game. Ovechkin's determination was infectious. Every Washington player was throwing their body in front of the shots, winning battles, and doing whatever it took. This team had been hardened by all those past failures, and it showed. "This group has a lot of resiliency," Coach Trotz said during the run, and now they were proving it. The morning of the Game 7 in Tampa, Trotz himself tried to keep the mood light, famously skating a hot lap in practice, a ritual usually led by Ovechkin to ease the tension and draw laughs. But when the puck dropped on May 23rd, 2018, the focus in Ovechkin's eyes was unmissable. Here was another chance to finally reach the Stanley Cup final. One game to validate all the years of struggle. In the visiting locker room before taking the ice, Ovechkin's teammates could see how locked in he was. "I think Ovi has been on a mission," Trotz observed, as of his captain's mindset that day. They say in Game 7 the first goal is often the difference, and Ovechkin wasted no time proving that true. Just 1 minute and 2 seconds into the first period, he found a soft spot in the Lightning defense and snapped a one-timer that fluttered past goalie Andrei Vasilevsky on Washington's very first shot. In the biggest game of his life, the Great 8 had given his team a 1-0 lead in record time. "The first goal was very important," Ovechkin later said. "After that, you could see we have all the momentum on our side." Indeed, that goal seemed to inject confidence into every Capital on the bench. Washington never let up. Andrea Burakovsky scored twice in the second period to extend the lead, and Ovechkin continued to fire every chance he got, determined to leave nothing in reserve. On the other hand, goaltender Braden Holtby was locked in a trance, pitching his second consecutive shutout. By the final minutes, the Lightning were beaten in spirit. They managed only 7 shots in the entire third period as the Caps clamped down defensively. When the horn sounded, the scoreboard read 4-0 Washington. The Capitals were Eastern Conference champions, off to the Stanley Cup final for the first time in 20 years, the first time ever for Ovechkin. The 2018 Stanley Cup final was a showdown between 2 unlikely opponents, with destiny on the line. The Caps, driven by Ovechkin's hunger, and the Vegas Golden Knights, a first-year expansion team on a fairy-tale run of their own. As the series began in Las Vegas, Ovechkin wore the focused man look on a mission, just one final hill to climb. However, the Capitals stumbled in Game 1, a wild 6-4 loss, but Ovechkin did his part, dishing out hits and creating chances, even if he was held off the score sheet. There was no panic in the air, however. Washington had lost Game 1 in 3 of their 4 playoff series that spring, and each time they came back. Game 2 was Ovechkin's chance to make a mark, and the captain delivered. Midway through that contest, he parked himself at his customary spot in the left face-off circle on a power play. With a quick flick of his wrists, he one-timed a feed past Marc-Andre Fleury for his first ever Stanley Cup final goal, giving Washington a lead. The Caps held on to win Game 2, thanks in part to Ovechkin's goal and relentless backchecking in the final minutes. As the series shifted back to DC, with the series tied 1-1, you could feel the city's energy in the air. Washington hadn't hosted a Stanley Cup final game since 1998, and their superstar was intent on seizing the moment. In Game 3 on home ice, Ovechkin offered one of the signature moments of the final. Just minutes into the game, he seized the rebound in front of the Vegas net, and while falling, swept the puck into the goal from his knees. It was the night's first goal and set a tone for a 3-1 Capitals victory. By now, Ovechkin was not just leading on the stat sheet, he was throwing his body in front of shots, back-checking vigorously, and urging his teammates on every shift. He played a total game, he played within the system, he led us to a championship, he did the lead. Capitals GM Brian McClellan would later say of Ovechkin's transformation, and indeed the once criticized one-dimensional scorer had become a complete player in these playoffs, willing to do whatever it took to win. Washington had pushed their series lead to 3-1 after a dominant Game 4, and suddenly the franchise sat one win away from hockey's holy glory. One win away, a place that had seemed so far-fetched so long. June 7th, 2018, Las Vegas, Nevada. Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final. And this game, it was a roller coaster. The Knights and Caps traded blows through 2 periods. However, it was Washington that jumped ahead on a Jacob Vrana breakaway, only for Vegas to tie it moments later. On a power play soon after, Ovechkin found a seam in the Knights' defense. With one chance, one shot, he blasted the puck past Fleury's glove, a vintage Ovi one-timer, to give Washington a 2-1 lead. The captain's 15th goal of the playoffs was also the biggest of his life, coming midway through the game that could decide it all. But nothing came easy for the Caps. Before the second period ended, Vegas rallied with 2 goals, and suddenly Washington trailed 3-2, entering the third. In the intermission, there was no panic in the Caps locker room. This team had been down in elimination games before, and they had always responded. Early in the third, Devante Smith-Pelly, a depth forward who became an unlikely hero, made a heroic play to tie the game 3-3, scoring while falling down. And then, with 7 minutes and 37 seconds left on the clock, Lars Eller poked a loose puck past Fleury to put Washington in the lead. Ovechkin was on the bench for that goal, leaning over the boards, eyes wide, when Eller scored the goal. Ovi threw his arms up and roared. He could almost taste it now. However, still, 7.5 minutes remained on the clock. 7.5 agonizing minutes to protect a 1-goal lead. Every tick of the clock felt slower than the last. Ovechkin took the ice for seemingly every other shift, blocking shots with his legs, clearing pucks, doing anything to eat away the time. As the final seconds wound down, Ovechkin sat on the bench, gloved hands pressed to his face, peering upward in a mix of hope and anxiety. Then the buzzer sounded. It was over. The Washington Capitals were the Stanley Cup champions, and Ovechkin's moment had finally arrived. Ovi vaulted off the bench, tossing his gloves and stick aside, and sprinted into the arms of teammates joining in from every direction. Years of heartbreak, years of breaking things down and trying again. This group never gave up. And we finally did it, an emotional Holtby said amid the celebration. Ovechkin's smile was as wide as it's ever been, pure unfiltered joy. In the post-game pandemonium on the ice, he saw to Nicholas Backstrom, his longtime running mate, and the two embraced tightly, both in tears. They had grown up together in this organization, endured all the pain together, and now stood together at the summit. As the victors lined up to receive the Stanley Cup, Ovechkin bounced on his skates, barely able to contain himself, and the NHL commissioner, Gary Bettman, handed the trophy to Ovechkin, the captain of the Washington Capitals. In that singular instant, every narrative about Ovechkin's career was rewritten. He wasn't just one of the greatest goal scorers of all time, was a champion.